Right, welcome back, Data Analytics Ireland. It's good to have you here with us again. I want to continue on some work we've been doing with Excel, looking at some different options around working with data in Excel, manipulating it, creating charts, etc. So today on this video, what we're looking to do is basically validate cell values in particular cells against a predetermined set of rules in the logic. So to kind of show you, first of all, this is actually the output. What we're trying to do is run the logic and say, look at all a particular set of cells or cells. In this instance, we're going to be looking at Ireland and Scotland petrol values. But essentially, you could put the same logic across all these cells. And what we're trying to do is say, if this is a company set of accounts and you would budget it for X amount, is that value in here greater than smaller than that X amount? If it's greater, we'll then highlight it, and the value or the color we're giving it is red. So essentially, if you have large spreadsheets and you're trying to figure out or go through how to basically see which is within or without, not within budget, and then highlight it by loading the data and running a program, this will quickly do it for you. So let's first of all look at the underlying data. So this is actually the underlying data. And this is the data we're going to load in. So, there's typical accounting categories here: sales, cost sales, gross profit, so on and so forth. So that's pretty much the data set. I've kept it quite small. This could obviously be a lot bigger, could be spread out over multiple sheets. That's not for today. But today is just to basically check if I was sitting here and I wanted to quickly run a program and say I have a set of data in Excel that's come from some accounting package. Are we within or without outside budget, or where are we on track? That's what this program is going to do. Okay, so let's flick back to the code. This is the input at the moment. So as I counted the steps here is load Excel, run the functions, find the cells that don't meet the criteria, and then basically highlight those cells that are outside budget. So the first thing to do is we're actually run the file, okay, and open it. Okay, so that's pretty much this file here. I'll actually close this in a second. So that's that file there. And then we're basically saying if you find anything that has NA or is empty, just instead of having NA, just apply value 0. So that's basically your typical NumPy piece of code there, function to search for NaNs or NAs or empty values and just replace them with 0. Now, next bit I'm going to show you is, before we go on into the code, is when you're bringing files in, it can be a bit tricky with the data types, and it's more to do with how they all look. So at the moment, it all looks nice and perfect and rosy and everything can view it and perfect. Bob's your uncle. But if I was to just quickly comment these out, okay, rerun this code. So now you've got a problem. You've got scientific notation in here. So in this cell in Ireland, England, you've got it all in the different cells across different values and different categories. This is a problem. So if you loaded this in and you were showing this to somebody in your accounting department or a colleague or your manager, they'll be kind of saying, well, what's this? The figures don't make sense. So to get around that, usually that's associated with floats. So to get around that, we've converted just all those columns after they've been loaded into what they call int64. And that gives you the format you see here. Okay, so that's just a quick intro on why I'm doing that, and I wanted to show you the errors. In actual fact, when you see the scientific notation there, it's actually, the figures are probably fine. It's just that they're in scientific notation. It's meaningless to most people, but in order to get it in a format that can be read by you or anybody you're giving the data to, this is an easy and quick way to fix it. Okay, so essentially you're just taking each column and then you're converting its type to int64. Would say to you one thing is I haven't done it on category. And the reason I've done it on category because obviously it's not a number. So I've left that out. It's not here. But that's stating the obvious, but just to say that. Right. So we've covered off functions in previous videos. Again, we're going to use functions here. I'm probably going to use them a lot more going forward in different video tutorials, but it's something if you're new to programming, either in Python or any programming language, they're used quite widely, something just to get used to. So there's two functions here. Okay, the first one is the control checks, and the second one is check within budget. All right, so we'll go to the first function. So the control checks is essentially, I'll just go through these three and then I'll explain this logic. So what we're doing here is we are checking for petrol for Ireland. Okay, so petrol for Ireland is a row of 4, index 4, which is here. Okay, so remember these are the index values here. So row 4, the row of index value 4. And then it is index value 1 column. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so the same again for, we do the same, exactly the same again for Scotland. Okay, 4 and 4. So again, it's on the same row as our same petrol row, row index of 4, but it's column index of 4. So again, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so those two variables being created. In the middle of them is our budget figure. So our budget figure is the figure that we're saying if we're equal to it or underneath it, we're within budget set out by the company on their budgeting plans. If we're not, then we're outside the budget, means we've overspent more than actually we had anticipated. So that's what that figure's for. It's a variable. We can change that, and I'll change that in a second to show you how this all comes together. So at the moment it's set to 7,000 for this petrol. You could put in another budget values here. When you expand this code, you change that to budgets, printing, you could budget advertising, so on and so forth, and then expand this logic, and it will give you the same effect you're getting here. So that's that. So essentially, next few lines is we're basically saying on this line, if the value for Ireland for petrol is greater than the budget, and the value for Scotland's petrol is greater than the budget value, which is this, return a value of 1. Same here on this line, but it's just for Ireland. Same on this line, it's just for Scotland. And then basically we're saying on the last line, well, if it's petrol value for Scotland and Ireland is less than the budget, we'll then return a value of 4. Okay, so values being returned is 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're basically being returned here in this value. Okay, so that's that. So moving on, we basically now have a function called check within budget, right? And this is what it's basically doing is, right, if it's basically taking the values from here, so 1, 2, 3, or 4, bringing it in, and basically saying, depending on the value, it's applying a color here, here or here on this particular line. And the reason I'm saying on this particular line, because we've only for this particular scenario done this line, but we could do it over any of these lines. We could expand this code, as I said before. So essentially, this actually checked. What we're doing actually before we go further is we're making a copy, and then what we're doing is we're saying checked is basically the value it's equal to what the control checks function here returns, which is this value. So whatever that value here is, put into X, and then X is actually checked. Okay, and then we're basically saying whatever that value is, return it. So val goes to here. Okay, so now we have a value in here. We're basically saying whatever the checked, which is returned by the control checks value, which comes from X, which comes from val in the control checks, is basically what we're going to be checking. So if it's a value of 1, then we're basically saying, if it's a value of 1, then we're basically saying it's passed, it's gone through this particular bit of logic if statement, and it's basically returned true. and it's returned a value of 1. So in that scenario, petrol for Ireland be greater than the budget, and the petrol for Scotland value be greater than the budget. So that would return 1. So then what it's doing is it's using this iloc function, a piece of code, and it's basically saying go to line or index row value 4, column 1, and apply the color red. And then because it's the same for Scotland, it applies the value red, or makes the column red. So in this scenario, let's just check this, right? It's gone through all the different scenarios, so it must have returned 1. Sorry, it has gone through all the scenarios, it hasn't returned 1, my apologies. This scenario, the budget is 7. Ireland's petrol value basic cost is 5,000. So in that scenario, when it's gone through the logic up here, it wouldn't have returned 1. In this scenario, it's gone through it. It's basically said, oh, it's looking to see if the Irish petrol is greater than the budget. Again, it's 5,000, it's not bigger than 7, so it wouldn't return that. Again, if the Scotland petrol is greater than the budget, which it is, 15,000 is greater than 7,000, is returned a value of 3. So when I went through the logic, 3 would have been returned from here to here, through here, and onto here. And essentially then, it's basically said it's value 3 here, put the Scottish cell to 15,000, and what that's doing is basically highlighting that you're over budget. So if anybody was looking at reports or doing anything, they'd be able to validate and see that this is over budget. We need to review it more and take appropriate steps. Okay, so that's basically how the logic works and comes together. So at the moment, let's give you a scenario. We're saying that Ireland is 5,000, so it's under budget, so it's not going to change to red. So why don't we change this value to say 9,000? Okay, yeah, save it, and I'm just going to close it. Okay, so what you're seeing at the moment is in this scenario, it's returned a value 3 because only Scotland has basically been over budget. But now what I'm expecting is to return a value of 1 because Ireland and Scotland are over budget. And in that scenario, because it turns a value of 1, it makes this cell here red and also this cell here red. So this cell is going to remain at 15,000 in red, and this cell is going to change, I think it's the value 9,000 and to red. So let me just quickly run this. So there you go. So we inputted the 9,000 into the cell in Excel. Now it's reread the file and it said, hold on, it's now value 9,000, which is greater than the 7,000. It's over budget, give it a red. And because we haven't done anything to the Scotland value, but it's still over budget, it's staying at red. So that's a quick overview of how to validate cells in Excel and then how to highlight them. Hope you've gotten some good tips out of that and some good introduction and cell validation and highlighting cells and how to go about it. As always, if you like this video, can you please subscribe to our YouTube channel? Also go on to our Twitter and Facebook and YouTube channels. Follow there as well. Our links are all on our homepage of our website, dataanalyticsireland.ie. Thanks again for coming along. We should be having more videos soon. We'll try to follow on from each one, so keep an eye out. If you subscribe, you'll get the alerts. Thank you. Take care. Bye.